And naturally, you and Dylan are two of my most favorite people in the whole wide world.
I don't believe this. Are you still sulking about the band?
Who's sulking?
You are. Look, it didn't work out because you're just not good enough. I mean, nothing personal, man. I mean, I'm sure you've got a million talents. It's just that, well, to be honest, you were the lousiest drum I've ever heard.
If you'd like to commission a Knickknack sample platter, instructions in the description below. Today we're looking at an episode of 15, aka Hillside if you live in Canada. It aired on Nickelodeon in the early 90s and is perhaps best remembered as the first acting gig of one Ryan Reynolds.
You know, you can always tell when a guy's really unpopular. He starts hanging around 6-year-olds. I'm 13. Same difference.
And I bring up this common and amusing piece of trivia because, well, I'm not sure I have an in with this request, an angle I can take this sample platter, and I want to just throw that out there as bait on the hook when I drag you through some of my aimless thoughts. Look at baby Deadpool. I just want to pinch his cheeks.
Aren't you going to ask me how I feel about it?
So how do you feel?
Hey, I feel lousy. I feel totally, absolutely, 100% lousy.
Think Ryan Reynolds got this far on his superior acting method?
Coming Home is the 6th episode of 15's 3rd season, the 32nd episode overall. It was written by Ian Weir, who wrote all but 5 of the show's episodes, and was directed by Michael Berry, who directed the entire series. And, well, talking about this one episode in isolation is kinda tricky, because 15 is a soap opera, and soap operas are always in the middle of a story. I think many of us have had that experience of getting the odd weekday off from school or work, turning the TV on at 11 a.m., and finding a stray episode of Days of Our Lives or The Young and the Restless and just being completely lost. In soap operas, there's no such thing as a self-contained episode. You can pop on a random episode of House MD, and even if you've never seen the show and you don't know the characters and you don't know where they are in their character arcs, you can still follow the medical mystery and drama of it all because it'll present a concise 45-minute story with a beginning, middle, and end. You can't say the same for, say, another medical drama like General Hospital, a show that feels like it's perpetually in the second act of a 3-act story, with characters reacting to plot beats you missed and very little having moved forward by the time the credits roll. If you're in it for the long haul, if you're willing to commit to watching a soap opera regularly and absorbing its serialized narrative for weeks and months and years, then okay, that's when you'll get something out of it. That's the scale in which a story really takes shape. Following a story like this can actually be kinda thrilling. I've never been much of a soap opera watcher, but for 3-ish years of my childhood, I was a committed reader of the Prince Valiant comic strip, which is serialized in a similar manner, slowly telling a singular story that began in 1937. Unless you're in your late 90s, anytime you pick up Prince Valiant, you have to start in the middle of the story, and a single comic offers very little of that story in of itself. But if you stick with it for a while, a narrative does start to take shape. Of course, then I stopped reading it, and going back to Prince Valiant today, it feels as inscrutable as ever. It's not a bad form of storytelling, it's just a different form of storytelling, one with its own pros and cons. This style lets you ruminate on characters and moments and scenes much longer than a more traditional narrative. Unfortunately for this project, for Sample Platter, it's a form of storytelling that doesn't lend itself easily to, say, the review of a single episode. I'll summarize Coming Home as best I can. Dylan and Chris audition Roxanne as a singer for their rock band. She does a subpar job, Dylan wants her out, but Chris has an obvious crush on her and wants her in. The crush is obvious to Chris's girlfriend Ashley, who dumps Chris and takes her girlfriend Courtney out to get a makeover. Courtney and her brother Billy, psst, that's Ryan Reynolds, are dealing with the news that they're getting a new stepmom, and Billy lashes out against Chris. Billy used to be the drummer for the rock band. And then Billy moves on to picking on David. Meanwhile, Brooke joins the cheerleading squad in some ill-conceived attempt to get Dylan's attention. They dated a long time ago, but Dylan's not biting, leaving Brooke's friend Stacy very confused. Meanwhile, Arseman is getting the school's talent show ready when she gets news from David that Matt is doing well in the substance abuse treatment center and will be coming home soon.
You know, I gotta admit, I really miss him. Matt was a really good friend. Correction, Matt is a really good friend.
Right.
And he's gonna be back from the treatment center soon. Hey, you hire the brass band and I'll roll out the red carpet for him.
Yeah, this is the coming home the title is referring to, and is a passing line about what a character is doing off screen. We see a few of the acts for the talent show, which according to the editing is happening at the same time as Dylan and Chris are having a fight in the garage, even though Chris is in the talent show. And also, this isn't the talent show episode. Next episode is the talent show episode. It's titled Talent Show, and is when the bulk of the talent show actually happens. This is just talent show preamble, I guess.
The very life of life. In its brief course, by all the realities and truths of existence. The joy of growth. The splendor of action. And the glory of power.
No storylines begin or end in this episode. Not because it's the middle episode of a multi-parter, but because it's just how soap operas roll. Speaking of how soap operas roll, the talent show is being held on the school stairwell and not on a stage or in a classroom. This was a very cheap show that only really had 4 regular sets despite production moving from Ottawa to Nickelodeon Studios for season 3. This feels very soap opera-esque, shows that produce episodes as quickly and cheaply as possible to maintain a 5-days-a-week schedule, with flat lighting and dull multicam staging and sets that could be easily repurposed for several different functions. If you shoot this set from one angle, it looks like a high school hallway. If you shoot it from another angle, it looks like a locker room. But then again, 15 never had that soap opera schedule. If it was filming 60-episode seasons and airing 5 times a week, that'd be one thing. But this show had brief seasons. The first 3 seasons were only 13 episodes each, with 3-month gaps between broadcast, with a final season of 26 episodes. And it was a weekly show, airing on Sundays. And okay, yes, the budget is clearly not very high, but it wasn't any more rushed of a production than, say, Hey Dude, which filmed the exact same number of episodes in roughly the same amount of time. If anything, 15 had it easier because it didn't have to work around on-location shooting. So at some point, this becomes a stylistic choice, an emulation of soap operas rather than a soap opera out of production necessity, taking their open-ended narratives, melodrama, and filming style for its own sake. And it's not a soap opera parody. There's no wink at the camera in any of this. In this one episode alone, they're making earnest attempts at will they, won't they romances, substance abuse subplots, and genuine character conflict. Not that we don't have silly scenes. It may be a soap opera, but it's also a kid show.
Look into my crystal. You are becoming dizzy. Dizzy, you want to sleep, but you won't. Now. 1, 2, 3. Honk! You will become an obnoxious talk show host.
Hey, I'd like to win $25,000. All you have to do is spin this wheel behind me, and you'll win a luxury trip to Antarctica where you'll stay 3 nights, 4 nights at an lovely igloo.
That is enough, Raymond.
Again, you can't really review an episode of 15 in isolation. You need to take in the series as a whole. And we will. Knacks proper will be reaching 1991 very soon, and with it a deep dive into the show's longer narrative. But since this is a commissioned video that a very nice person paid actual money for, I feel I should make some sort of conclusive statement about coming home. You see, if you... Look, it's Ryan Reynolds!
Yeah, maybe I'm getting sick and tired of the way you treat people. Acting like you're Mr. Hotshot or something. So maybe I should do something about it.
Let me give you a piece of advice, Bill. Do yourself a favor. Stop trying to pretend you're so tough. 'Cause you're not.